What's up, everybody? Dan here with Dan and Sarah Makers, and welcome back to part 2 of our special holiday gift tool essential ultimate breakdown video for Tool Tuesday. So I got a little long-winded with the previous episode, but that is because I am trying to describe and explain why I choose some of these tools over other tools. I give, in a lot of these categories, I give kind of a budget-friendly version, and I give a more expensive or high-quality version, in my opinion. So, as I said before, we have an affiliate link with Amazon. It's down below in the description. All the tools that I can find on Amazon, I've put links to them. We get a small percentage of the sale price. It helps us produce videos like this in the future moving forward, and it just helps everybody in the end. It doesn't cost you anything extra, so it's no harm, no foul there. So, without further ado, let's get into it. One of the big risks in renovation remodeling work is electrical wires, especially live electrical wires. You open up a wall and you see some wires in there, they're dangling, someone ripped a fixture off and now you've got bare wires there. It's really hard to tell, especially if you're not familiar with the structure, layout of the building, whatever. What may be live, what may not be live. There have been so many times I've seen wires hanging out of light fixtures, junction boxes, walls, where they're just bare wires sticking out. Sometimes you can see the copper conductor, sometimes they're cut off flush, but you don't know if they're live or not. You don't want to just go down there, grab it, and, you know, shock yourself or even worse, electrocute yourself. So a great safety tool is one of these little voltage detectors. These basically are like a little pen, and they have a couple batteries in them. You turn them on, and you put the nose of this voltage detector up against a wire or in one side of a receptacle or another, a light socket or whatever, and it will either flash with a light, it will beep, it will vibrate. It'll do something or sometimes multiple things to let you know that this is a live conductor. There is a live wire in here. This is great to help avoid cutting through wires that may be live that you think are dead. It's nice to always just double check them. When I was a superintendent, I always had one of these in my vest, and I could walk over and I could just hit a wire and check. Sometimes the people doing demolition work would carry them, sometimes they don't. So it's a great safety device and also avoids a lot of problems. So there are quite a few different styles. There are quite a few different manufacturers. This is Greenlee. These are made by Fluke. This one's made by Milwaukee. This particular one here, let's see if I can turn it on. It beeps and it's got a little LED light in there, so when you're sticking it down into a box, you can see what you're actually, are you putting it up against a red wire? Are you putting it against a black wire insulation-wise? And you can tell. It also helps you track down wires if you're doing renovation or remodeling work. You pull out all the switches in a 3-gang box for a bathroom, and a couple are bathroom lights and one's a bathroom fan, and you've got like 8 wires coming into it. Which one is the power coming in? You separate them all, you turn the breaker back on, and you start searching, and you find which one is actually the power in wire. So that's a real nice feature. Another tool that's helpful, kind of secondary, is one of these outlet testers. And these basically, again, this is a Greenlee. This is AW Speary. You plug these into a receptacle. It tells you if the receptacle is wired correctly, if it's got an open neutral, disconnected ground, if the hot and neutral are reversed. It tells you those types of things. This one just troubleshoots the receptacle and tells you if it's correctly wired or incorrectly wired and how. And this particular one here, it has a little button on top that you can push if you are testing GFCI receptacles in a kitchen or bathroom. You push that little button on top, it shorts it out, and basically the GFCI should trip instantaneously. So that's a nice way of checking to make sure your GFCIs are wired correctly, operating correctly, all that kind of stuff. So inexpensive tool, but very beneficial. If you want to step up a little bit further, this little Greenlee set is a set that I bought quite a few years ago. It has our voltage detector, or receptacle tester, and it also has a little digital multimeter that tests DC, AC, ohms, so you can test continuity, you can test current, resistance, things like that. So it's a nice little set that's kind of an all-in-one set. Continuing on with electrical are wire strippers and cutters. This is the first style of wire stripper cutter that I ever got. It's a small spring-loaded cutter. It will go from 20 gauge through 10 gauge wire. So that'll do most building wire that an average house would have. It's got little tiny pliers at the tip that really aren't that useful. It's got multiple strippers, a cutter, and then it's got some holes in it to twist wire, bend it 180 degrees if you want. As far as this type of tool, it's great for a specific thing, but it's not as utilitarian or universal as what I might want. I got this smaller one that goes down to 26 gauge, so if you're doing telephone wire or telecom type stuff, it goes to those much, much smaller wire gauges. Not necessarily the tool I would recommend for this, you know, most universal pack out. They have slightly larger ones. As you can see, the Klein and the Milwaukee, they almost look the same. This Milwaukee is very, very similar to the little channel lock one, the blue one that I showed you. The only difference is it has cutters for a 632 and 832 screws. So you can thread a screw. Those are the two most common sizes that you're going to run into for receptacles and cover plates. You screw the screw in there and you clip the or close the pliers and it'll cut the screw. Nice feature, but still it's not that many features available. This Klein, again, it's mostly what you're going to run into with residential electrical. The only thing is it only strips 14 and 12 gauge wire properly. It has that 632 and 832 cutter, and then at the tip here it actually has a 14-2 and 12-2 cutout for Romex wire, so you can cut down on the outside of the insulated sheathing and it will cut that outer plastic wrap, and then you can slide it off and expose the individual inner wires. So that's a nice feature if you're doing a lot of electrical rough-in and residential with 14-2 and 12-2 Romex wire. But again, not that useful. This tool here, it's a lot more universal. It has a lot more screw cutting ports. It has crimps for different types of insulated connectors, and it's got the strippers up here and loops. So I would say it's not the most bells and whistles awesome one, but it definitely has a lot more utilitarian features built into it. So as far as a one and done wire stripper for electrical work, I would say this definitely is a nice tool to have. Needle nose pliers. These are definitely a beneficial tool to have. Sometimes you just need to get in somewhere, pull a cotter pin, twist little wires in somewhere, hold something very small. They're excellent tools to have, very useful. This is a very simple style. It's just the needle nose pliers. It's got a little bit of a grip on the end, and then it's got a wire cutter down at the bottom. So these are kind of an intermediate size. You can get them larger, you can get them smaller. This is a Knipex. Again, hopefully I didn't mess it up. Made in Germany. This has a few more features. It's got the wire cutter. It's also got some wire strippers and some other little indents along with some crimpers at the end. Do you need all this? If you've got a wire cutter stripper like I showed previously, you probably don't, but these are handy to have. Screwdrivers are, again, another really common tool. You can get very small kits like this. This is made by Vera, and this is a little flip out one. You've got a handle, an extension, and you've got multiple bits all in one. So that's kind of a cool little flip out set. This is a Makita branded set. It's got a ratchet driven handle that goes in forward and reverse and locks. It's got an extension. It's got a whole array of different style bits, including some hex drivers. This is a nice kit, although it isn't the highest quality. And then there is, made by Cobalt, this is another little kit. It's got a little belt holster if you want it. Again, it's got forward, reverse, and lockout features on it. It's got an extendable little magnet wand. It's got some different bit drivers in different cases here. So if you want to have quite a few different styles of screwdrivers available to you in a compact form that's organized, these are really nice to have. I would say make sure that you confirm that these are the standard 1/4-inch hex drive. That way, if you lose a bit, if you strip a bit out, because a lot of times these bits are not high quality, they put very cheap bits in them, you can change them out or replace them with a better quality bit that might not be cammed out, stripped out, broken, whatever. Another option for screwdrivers is the multiple style screwdriver. So this is made by Lennox, this is Klein, this is Greenlee. These are screwdrivers where you have a handle and then you have a shaft that comes out, and typically you have multiple size drivers. Most all of them are two-ended. This is a 6, 7, 8 in 1 or so. It's got some square drive, it's got Phillips, it's got straight bladed, and then it's got a couple hex drivers on it. So that's one style that you can get. This Greenlee, this is a 9 in 1, and then this Klein here is a 10 in 1. Just be careful. Avoid the temptation of throwing one of these little nut driver styles into a power drill or cordless drill and using it as a nut driver. They are not designed for that. They will split and bend, and you will destroy these if you use them in a power driver. So just avoid that, and just use them in the handle. Be very diligent about putting all the pieces back, because you'll pull it out and this piece will be missing, and you'll be missing like 4 or 5 different driving options. So just put them all back together again. But if you want basically 10 screwdrivers or nut drivers all in one, this is a really, really nice way to go. Hex wrenches are another good tool to have if you're setting trim on plumbing and things like that, or you've got little set screws. You run into Allen screws or hex screws every now and again that you need to work with. A set like this, which is a loose set where I can pull the wrench out and then put it back if I'm very diligent about it, is nice to have. But as you can see, out of the like 18 Allen wrenches or hex wrenches that would have been in this set, only like 9 or 10 of them are actually still in this set. The others are probably in a Ziploc bag full of loose Allen wrenches, hex wrenches somewhere. I don't know where though, unfortunately. So the next option is to get one of these little fold-out tools. And this has all the different sizes. You can get them in metric and standard. You can even get spline drive or ball end styles. So this is a really nice option so you don't lose your Allen wrenches. So I would definitely say that this is a good option to have. You get one in metric and one in English standard, SAE, and then you've got pretty much what you need except for the really large sizes. So I would definitely suggest getting a couple of these. Crescent wrenches. Now when I say a crescent wrench, that is a brand name for a style of tool, just like if I say a skill saw or a sawzall. Those are brand names for a style of tool. These are the parallel jaw adjustable wrench. Maybe that's the correct term. But as far as one of these here, you can get them with padded handles. You can get them as just plain handles, metal handles. I am okay with just the plain handles. I would say for the average person, an 8-inch or a 10-inch crescent wrench is going to be what you need. A few of the things that might dictate the size that you determine to get or choose to get is how wide the actual jaws are. If you're dealing with smaller nuts or bolts or washers, like plumbing fixtures and things like that, where you have a very narrow, skinny nut, maybe the wider jaw is too wide and it won't do what you need. But as far as capacity, you know, maybe check around, see how wide the jaw actually opens up for what you need. But Proto, Crescent, you know, pretty much any company out there makes a decent adjustable wrench. So definitely one of these is what you want to have in your toolbox. Another really useful tool is the slip joint plier, pump pliers, or channel locks. They're pretty universally identifiable by kind of this turquoisey blue handle, whatever that is, of the channel lock brand. These are all very similar. The only difference is the jaw style. These are flat jaws. These have kind of a hex angle, and these have kind of a rounded jaw. This 10 to 12 inch size is a pretty good universal size for these slip joint pliers. If you are dealing with a lot of pipe, the curved jaw pliers are probably the most beneficial for you. If you're going to be dealing with nuts and bolts and hex-headed things, you might want to look into this kind of hex style. And then, of course, there's kind of the universal parallel jaw. These work for a lot of different shapes and sizes. So these are kind of a good in-between. There is also now this style where it's adjustable with a little push button at the pivot, and you push it down and that just slides up and down. These are nice. As you can see, this has kind of that hex shape to it. These are made by Vice Grip / Irwin, I believe. Yeah, Irwin Vice Grip. And then these are, I'll probably butcher the term or pronunciation, the Knipex, whatever. These are made in Germany. These are their Cobra pliers. They're much skinnier profile, but they also operate the same way as these Irwin Vice Grips. They're a lot narrower though. These are very, very nice. These are kind of the gold standard, top of the line ones. I bought this at a surplus sale for a state auction, so I actually got them for I think $1, so I lucked out on that one. As far as the channel locks, I say the straight jaw, probably 10 to 12 inch. You can't go wrong with those. You open them up, you slide them, and then you close them back up, and that allows you to adjust to the size range that you want. They come very small and also very large. The one thing on these channel locks is twisting sideways like this will cause the jaws to get out of line. I've got many pairs that are like that, including this pair. They're probably about an 1/8 inch out. And then also, if for some strange reason you decide you want to hammer on the side here, that will also mess them up. One nice feature of these that I used a lot as a plumber is if you have a shower arm, kind of that chrome plated shiny shower arm that your shower head attaches to, that threads in, and you can thread it in, you know, X number of turns by hand, but those last couple turns, you don't want to put a pair of jawed pliers on that chrome finish and tighten them up and mar up that chrome. So without the shower head on and just the shower arm, you just stick the handle up inside that shower arm. It's padded, and you can rotate it another full turn or whatever to tighten it up so it doesn't leak in the wall. For plumbing repair nowadays, with a shark bite style fitting, which is basically you can get a shark bite style fitting that will adapt to almost any type of pipe, whether it's copper, PEX, PVC, something like that. It's just a slip on the end of the pipe, push it on, and it's done. You don't need to solder it, you don't need to glue it, you don't need to crimp it, you don't need to thread it. That is a huge advantage compared to what used to be needed to repair plumbing. With that being said, the one thing that you do have to do is you have to be able to cut into the current plumbing system that needs to be repaired, and you need to cut pipe to length with the shark bite fittings. Shark bite fittings are pretty expensive, so if you're going to do a lot of plumbing, I would recommend getting the conventional style fittings and the tools to install it that way. But if you've got a leak in the wall or something like that, shark bite is definitely the way to go. That being said, you need to cut the pipe that you are going to use or tie into. So this is a small rotary tubing cutter. This is typically designed for copper tubing, LMK style copper tubing. This will cut between, I believe it goes down to a 1/8 inch tubing, which you're probably not going to get into unless you're doing water supplies to, say, like a refrigerator or a swamp cooler or something like that. Typically, you're not going to get that small, but it'll also go up to a 1-inch copper tubing. So this is a rotary tubing cutter, so it'll spin around and around, and each time you turn the handle a little bit more, and it'll tighten up a little bit. It also has a built-in deburring tool that you go around the inside of the pipe. This deburring tool not only reduces friction on the inside of the pipe with fluid flow through it, but it could also be used on plastic tubing. So if you've cut plastic pipe or tubing with a hacksaw, you can remove the burr with that. You can get separate deburring tools like this little Milwaukee one, and it just basically goes around the inside of the pipe and removes that burr. If you're going to do a lot of PVC or PEX style pipe repair or cutting, these single jaw style here, this is an okay tool to have. This will cut the PEX pretty cleanly and relatively easily. So this is a nice tubing cutter to get if you're going to deal with PEX. And it'll go to approximately a 1-inch PEX tubing also. Hacksaws are a pretty beneficial tool. They do the job of kind of like a Sawzall in some situations. They'll cut a lot of metals, they'll cut plastics, fiberglasses, things like that. You could cut wood, might be a little bit slow, but depending on the teeth per inch would be kind of what dictates how easy you can cut. If you are going to cut something large with a hacksaw, you're limited by this distance here. So you can probably only cut something about 4 inches, 3.5, 4 inches deep. This particular one, it's adjustable for length. Currently has a 12-inch blade in there, but you might have a 10-inch blade or a smaller blade or something like that. You can loosen up the blade and you can turn it in 90-degree increments because of this little square down here. So if you need to flush cut and basically cut sideways like this, you can. So if you've got some nails sticking out of a board on the floor, you can turn it and cut them flush instead of trying to cut at an angle and twisting the blade. So plastic pipes, copper pipes, PEX pipes, something like that, ABS, this would do that, albeit slow. It is a way to do it. That was a relatively inexpensive hacksaw frame. This is a little bit better. This is the Lennox. It's got a much beefier frame, so it can get a lot more tension on the blade, and it will just resist binding quite as much because the blade's a lot more solidly held. This one, it will cut vertically, and then it also has a 45-degree offset, so it won't cut flush or at a right angle, sorry, but it will cut at a 45-degree angle. So this is a fairly nice hacksaw frame, but it won't adjust to different size or length blades like the more inexpensive frame. And then finally, if you want a really compact one for either putting in your toolbox, you don't feel like you need a full-size hacksaw, you can get this smaller, basically handheld hacksaw frame, and you just basically put any blade in there. You can stick them out, you know, pull this little adjustment nut, and you can slide the blade out a little bit and then clamp it back down. Get in there flush to, you know, a lot closer quarters with the end of the blade. So this is a more compact version of a hacksaw frame. A small little handsaw like this is a really nice one to carry. It's a crosscut saw, which means it will cut best across the grain of wood. It will not rip very well. It won't rip down the length of a 2x4 or something like that very easily. Won't cut plywood that easily either, but you can still do it. And because there's no back on it, you can cut an indefinite length or depth as long as the board's not wider than what the saw is. The biggest thing about these saws is when they come to the store, the entire blade is coated with some kind of like polymer, rust resistant whatever, and it's got printing all over it. Take some sandpaper, a sanding sponge, something, and sand all of that off and get down to the actual steel, or else you're going to be fighting the friction of that coating heating up when you're cutting. It's going to heat up and get sticky and tacky and just smear all over, and you don't want to fight that. So the saw will run a lot smoother without that coating. So a nice handsaw like this is really nice to have, especially if you're going to do some carpentry work and you don't want to invest in a circular saw. Another type of saw that you can get, these Japanese style or razor tooth pull saws. They cut on the pull, not on the push. So the blade can be much, much thinner than the standard American style of saw. These blades typically are replaceable. This one cuts wood really well if you're going to do some trim work. It's a very fine tooth blade, very good cut quality. This will also cut plastic pipe really well, so ABS, PVC, PEX, things like that. It'll cut it pretty cleanly. You'll have a little bit of burr that you'll need to clean up, but this will do a really nice job in multiple materials like that. And then if you're doing just little hobby stuff and you don't need something that substantial, you can get just a really small little Japanese style pull saw like this. So this is great for little trim work. It's got very fine teeth but very sharp teeth, so it will cut a lot of little pieces of trim wood, things like that very nicely, very quickly, and it'll also do plastics quite well. So this is a very small saw. Again, the blade's replaceable. It's easy. It's just got a push button on one side. It might be harder to put back in. There we go. So this is a really nice small saw that you could use. Every now and again you need to either smooth some metal out or wood or sharpen something. I would say some really handy tools are to get yourself a metal file. Get a good metal file. Nicholas, they make good metal files. And then one way to maintain your metal file is to get a file card, which is basically just a bent wire brush, and you can take it and clean any of the gummed up shavings out of your file. So a mill bastard file is basically a big flat square file. It's got, if you can get it to where it has teeth on the edges of the file, that's also a benefit. So those are a couple inexpensive tools, but extremely handy. Another would be a rasp, a wood rasp. It's got teeth. This one, it has kind of a curved side on it and then a flat side, and it has a cross cut on one area and then a barbed tooth on the other, and that's on both sides. So this is nice if you're trying to file some wood down and get it shaped to do whatever you need it to do. Trim work, you know, getting the backside, relieving the backside, this might be a good tool to have. And then finally, probably one of the most beneficial tools that I found is this little Smith's two-sided diamond hone. It's basically like a file. It's got a coarse grit on one side and a fine grit on the other side. This works wonders. If you've been working with your utility knife and your blade is dull, you can sharpen your utility knife 20-30 times to almost original sharpness. So doing drywall, that really gums up utility knife blades and dulls them out fast. I can keep sharpening one blade over and over and over again with one of these. I can also do that with my kitchen knives or pretty much anything and get a good working surface or working blade back with one of these little diamond files. So these things are awesome. The Caulk Gun. This is another really beneficial tool to have. As you can see, this particular one is very skinny, very flat. The only place it actually goes to a full circle where it gets a little bit fatter is at the end. This is a pressure relieving caulk gun. I would say try to get that style if you can, because as you're pushing on the caulk gun, you want it to kind of back off a little bit so it's not oozing caulk out of the end. There are some caulks that no matter what you do, it seems like the entire tube will ooze out even though you've used just a little bit of it. This one's nice. It's made by Cox. But unfortunately, even though it's, you know, a good brand, it's made in England, it's got a couple of features that are a little bit lacking. It doesn't have a built-in cutter. Some of these will actually have a little cutter on the jaw, a little razor blade. And so you have to have a utility knife to cut the end off the tube. And then it had kind of this polymer plastic spike that rides up and down. As you can see, nothing's there anymore because it broke off. So I like a caulk gun that has a way to cut the tip on the brand new caulking tube and also a way to puncture the foil on the interior of that when you're done. So as far as a decent quality yet lightweight and compact caulk gun, this would be a good one to get. But as I said, it's got no cutter and the punch has broken off. This is kind of a step up from that Cox caulking gun there. This is a much bulkier gun. It's got a lot more kind of body to it to hold it together. It does have, like I said, some of the features that I like is, as you can see back here, it's got a lot of springs. These are to not only help drive the caulk gun, but it also gives you a little bit of that back off when you release the handle so that your caulk isn't oozing out constantly. It has a wire seal puncture that's bent down here and on the bottom of the gun. That's a nice one. It's not going to break or fall off too easily. And then inside the handle, it's got this hole right here. There's a razor blade mounted, and so you can actually cut the tube, the tip of the caulk gun tube off, and basically you just need this to open and cut and unseal the caulk gun. It's got a hook on the end, so you know if you needed to, you could hang it from something, and it's also got a little bit of a hook here. So this is a nice heavy-duty caulk gun, and not too bad. So this is kind of a good entry or mid-level gun that I would recommend personally. I've got a couple of these. I really like them. And then if you want to go all out, you can get the Albion caulk guns. This is kind of the high-end ones. This one's made in Taiwan though. The body on this rotates, so that's a nice feature. If you've cut the tip of your caulk gun tube at an angle to get that nice miter or chamfer inside of a corner, you can actually take it and you can rotate and adjust your tube. So if you're going from top to bottom and now you're going this way, you can spin it and get it in the correct orientation. This one, it does not have a cutter on it, which again is kind of a drawback. And on this particular one, the puncture wire is inside the handle, and it just folds back in and has a little retainer down here to hold it in place. So again, it does have that puncture wire. You can always have a utility knife to cut the tip on your caulk tube if you need to, but trying to find something to puncture inside, that's a tough one. And then just kind of an accessory, this is called the Caulked and Ready. Basically, it is a sheath or holster for your caulk gun. Just slides in there. It's got a nice big hook on it, so you can hook it to your belt if you need to. So if you're up on a ladder, you know, doing stuff, you can hang your caulk gun down in there and it's good to go. It's got a spike in the end here, and it has some openings to clean it out. And basically that spike will fit in the cut end of your caulk tube and help seal it. So while you're up on a ladder or storing your caulk gun, it's not, again, oozing out or drying out. So this is a nice little inexpensive, handy tool to have. Nail sets and punches are also a really nice tool to have. There are a lot of different situations where you need a nail set or a punch. You're driving out hinge pins, you're trying to set nails and trim work, you're pushing out cotter pins, things like that. They're a beneficial tool to have. There are different types and qualities. A lot of times you'll find a set with a small, medium, and large nail set. This is a Dasco Pro set here. Unfortunately, this particular set, most of these nail sets have rounded off or flattened out and flared out and gotten barbs on the end. This large one is actually bent. So whatever type of steel they used in this Dasco Pro set, they are not worth it. They are unfortunately really junky nail sets. But then again, I have this Dasco Pro. This is an actual like pin punch, and this is, I don't know, 1/4 inch, 5/16. I have used this for years and years and years as a framing nail set. So a lot of times you'll get nails in weird angles or something that's stuck out because the nail gun didn't drive it all the way, or you can't get your hammer in there that last little bit. This helps you get that nail set. Also nice for concrete formwork. Sometimes you can use what they call a pea shooter, which is like a slide hammer. This will also kind of get in there and drive those nails in. So this is a really nice tool to have. Even though it's not actually a nail set, it is. It definitely does its job. As far as a nail set that is a good quality set, I've got a couple of these, and I'm missing the large size right now to show you. But this is a set of Stanley nail sets, and these are really nice. They don't mushroom out, they don't bend, so they're beneficial to have. As far as kind of a really compact one-and-done nail set, DeWalt made this little steel nail set. It's got a little collar, kind of like an impact driver, and it's got 2 tips, and it's got a small and medium nail punch on one, and then a large and actually a Phillips bit on the other. So you just slide the collet back, you put your little nail set in there, and then you have a little bit of a utility screwdriver if you need it, and then you can just choose which size punch you want to use. Problem with this is you have this one spare piece that's floating around all the time, and you could very, very easily lose it unless you have a good toolbox to keep it in and you're very diligent in putting them back. This is just an Irwin punch set. It's got 6 different size punches in it, round punches, so cotter pins, drift pins, things like that. It's just got a nice little selection of different sizes. Metal cutters. These definitely are handy to have. If you're doing metal roofing, metal siding, a little bit of duct work, any type of metal cutting, these come in handy. Milwaukee, they had a style previously that was really inconvenient and not handy. They constantly were unlocking and opening. They changed their design. These are quite a bit better. I like these for an easy to find set. You can get a set of offsets. An offset means that the handle is at an angle that's a lot more up and out of the way when you're cutting to the actual jaws. So an offset set is good. And then in my opinion, the lefts and the rights, these are the left with the red, these are the rights with a little bit of the green. Left and right is pretty much all you need. You can get straight left and right sets that are not offset. honestly, the straights, which are the yellow handles, they aren't that beneficial in my opinion once you get your left and right offsets. So these are really, really nice to have. They cut smoothly. They don't roll the metal too much. I've used these for quite a few metal roofs now, and all hand cutting, and they have not loosened up or given me really any problem. I've had them in the rain a lot, and they haven't rusted up. So I'm really actually liking these. Being able to do a little bit of drywall repair is handy. One of the coolest tools I think that's been out somewhat recently, it's been out for quite a few years, but it's a pail scoop or bucket scoop. This is basically, it looks kind of like a drywall knife. It's got a little bit of a bend and a radius that fits multiple size buckets, including 5-gallon, 3-gallon, 2-gallon buckets really well. You can just scoop down in there, scrape the side of your bucket, it cleans the bucket off. Super handy tool to have. These are really, really nice. If you're going to do drywall, you've got drywall knives. And drywall knives basically put the mud on the wall. But to hold the mud and to load your knife, you want a drywall pan. Stainless steel, in my opinion, is the way to go. You've got a nice edge to clean your knife off on, and they're pretty durable. They're different styles, different lengths, but stainless steel is about the best one to go with. They have plastic mud pans that have like a little ribbon of metal embedded in the edge, but those crack and break over time. Stainless steel is really nice. These also come in really handy if you're working under a sink and you've got an angle stop or a valve that you've removed and it's dripping a little bit, or you've got to pull a P-trap off. These will get down in those really tight areas and they'll catch that water. So it's a nice nice trough, because sometimes putting a big paint bucket underneath a sink is really, really hard to do. That being said, if you're going to mix drywall mud from a powder form into your finished drywall mud that you want to use, you can mix it with a thin putty knife and, you know, kind of smear it and blend it with water, or you can go to a Goodwill or Value Village or a thrift store, secondhand store, and just go to the kitchen appliance area, and almost always they'll have like a kitchen mixer beater that you can put in your cordless drill, and you can use that to stir up your mud. So this is a really, really handy yet extremely cheap tool that you can get. A drywall sponge, a little sanding sponge. These come in all different sizes and grits and styles. They have square edges, they have beveled edges. This is pretty much all you need to do most of your sanding in preparation for texture or paint after you've done your drywall mud. Just don't sand so hard over tape that you start fuzzing up the paper tape or exposing the mesh tape if you've used that style of tape. So definitely a nice tool to have. You can wash these off under the water, squeeze them out, let them dry, and they will last quite a long time actually. The 5-in-1 putty knife, this is typically sold as a painting tool. It again is a really, really handy tool. You can pry open buckets, paint buckets. You can cut the tab on a 5-gallon bucket, just pop it like that. You can drive nails that stick out, or, you know, pound in screws a little bit with the end on it. You can clean your roller by scraping the paint out of it as you're washing it. This acts as a little bit of a chisel, a little bit of a putty knife. You can dig things out with the point, and then you can also pull some nails with the little nail puller. So a little 5-in-1 painting tool, really nice. This one's made by Red Devil. It's pretty sturdy. I've used it for a long time. I like this one. The ones that I really like are the stainless steel 4 and 6 inch knives here. These are the majority of all my tape coat. I will embed most all of my tape with just these knives here. So these are two of my go-to knives. They're stainless steel, so they don't rust, they don't get little spots on them. So those are really nice. I really, really like those. When I say they're stainless steel, if you have a blued steel, like a spring steel blade, they will get little rust spots on them. And if you don't use them every day, or they dry out or with a little bit of mud or moisture on them, you have to go through and sand them and clean them up before you use them again. So not a big fan of the spring steel. This one is also a spring steel. You can kind of see where the bluings come off. So this one's been cleaned and kept clean, so it hasn't rusted, but this could rust. So my favorite style of mud knife myself is the stainless steel knives here. So they just last a long time. The only thing you got to watch out for is if you get nicks in the blade, or if the blade gets a bow in it. Some people will pre-bow their blade, so when they're doing their fill coat to cover up their tape joint, they'll have a little bit more mud in the center. But these are my go-to knives. Stud sensors. If you're going to do renovation work, remodel work, hang pictures, install trim work, stud sensors actually are very handy. Handrails for stairs where you actually need to hit a stud for backer. A lot of these stud sensors now will detect pipe and wire and live electrical beyond just the wood blocking behind it. Some of them are sensitive enough or can differentiate wood studs from steel studs. So just kind of look at the features that a stud sensor has and determine what you do or don't need. Another thing you may want or may already have is marking instruments or tools. Doesn't sound that crazy or anything, but basically it's like felt tip markers. So there are quite a few different things out there. There's these Milwaukee ink saw. They're somewhat new. As you can see, they come in multiple different colors. They're basically like a Sharpie felt tip pen. They also have some metallic colors, so silvers and golds. And then of course you have the standard Sharpie, the black Sharpie pen. They also have an industrial series of Sharpie, the permanent ink. I don't really see that much of a benefit with the industrial versus the standard. And then they do have the really, really big Sharpies. So if you're trying to mark tools or something like that from a distance, this is pretty nice. You could also use this for signs, for yard sales or whatever. There are paint pens, which are basically like a liquid pen. It's almost like a can of spray paint in that you shake it around. There's a little agitating ball in there. Many different brands, many different colors. They all do the same thing. It's got a felt nib in there that you have to push down to release some of the paint into the nib, and then you draw for a while, right? And then it'll kind of dry up. You push it down again, release more ink into the end. Carpenter pencils, they're pretty standard. It's just a rectangular wooden pencil with lead in the center. You sharpen it by, just using a utility knife, pocket knives. They do have like rotary special sharpeners. I feel like those don't really do a good job on the lead itself. It kind of makes a weird shape that isn't that strong. So I just use a utility knife. So Carpenter pencils, you can buy them, or sometimes lumber yards give them away or sell them for inexpensive. There are a few styles of like extendable Carpenter pencils. They almost look like utility knives, but they are pencils. And here's an old Husky one where you push down kind of like a mechanical pen and the lead slides out. Haven't used those too much. And then there are these different types of extended pencils where they have a very long skinny point and you can extend the lead out. These are good for marking inside of cutouts on cabinets, things like that, when you've got junction boxes, electrical boxes to trace out. Just a couple different styles. This one actually has a little pencil sharpener built into the holder. There are also paint sticks, which are like a fluorescent waxy stick. They're crayons. You call them lumber crayons or keels. It's basically like a big, really hard crayon that you draw on lumber with. They come in different colors. They do have holders for them that they slide into, and it just kind of holds it. I don't find that these work really that well. And then these tend to break in your nail bags, so you end up with these little nibs of crayon in your nail bags. So I don't use these too much. Sometimes I will if I'm marking a lot of lumber, and that's one thing I'm doing right then and there. But just carrying it all the time in my nail bags, I don't really do. There are a couple of colored pencils here. These are made by Prismacolor, and red and blue. Just a nice differentiating color, so if you got to mark up blueprints or plans or something like that, they're nice, they stand out. They are erasable. If you're doing trim work or finish work, or you just have a notepad or something and you want a durable pencil, these Pentels, there's a third one that I don't have with me right at the moment, but they come in 0.5 millimeter, 0.7, and 0.9 millimeter lead. They're mechanical pencils. They have erasers on them. They're really durable. They're really nice. The larger 0.7 and 0.9 millimeter are real durable for construction, outdoor activities. The 0.5, I like using that when I'm doing a lot of trim work because I can get really nice, precise marks on my trim work boards to cut instead of using a large carpenter's pencil. And the lead is always a consistent diameter. There's also kind of a China marker. This is a mechanical one. It's a 2mm, and it has kind of a red waxy China lead, I guess you would call it, inside. So that's nice if you're marking glass or some kind of really slick surface like sheet metal or stainless steel, something like that, that won't take a standard pencil or ink. For actual like nicer pencils, if I'm doing calculations, if I'm drawing something up, this Rotary, it's a German mechanical pencil company. They have these nice heavy-duty mechanical pencils. They're all black. They have like 3 different levels. They have an all brass that's been blackened. They have a plastic and brass, and then they have an all plastic version. And then finally, for a really, really small, compact, lightweight pencil pen combo, this is a Skillcraft B3 Aviator. One of my buddies that flies planes showed me this a month ago and never seen it before. But this is a tiny little pen, and you rotate the shaft of it, and it's a 0.5mm mechanical pencil with an eraser under a cap. It's got a black ink pen and a red ink pen, and you just rotate it and it just pops them out. Very nice, very durable metal pen. As far as marking stuff down, writing important notes, writing dimensions, measurements, things like that, so you aren't constantly forgetting what you wrote down or measured, there are these little 3x5 notepads. So you've got probably the most durable would be your Write in the Rain. It's a notepad where you can get it wet, you can get it dirty, things like that, and it doesn't turn to mush on you. They're kind of expensive, but they are really nice for wet environments, snowy environments, muddy environments, things like that. You can clean the paper off. Ink pens don't work as well on them, so pencils tend to be a real go-to for me with these Write in the Rain books. You can get other non-Write in the Rain style notepads. This one came from a rental company. It has a plastic cover, so it's a little bit more durable. Same size. And then, of course, you can get the full paper ones. You can get these in big packs on Amazon or Walmart or wherever you want to. And these will fall apart in the rain. There is one other company out there, I think Rothko, possibly. I'll add a link to it. They make a similar Write in the Rain style of notepad, and they're kind of like an olive drab color cover and paper. I think they were kind of tactical military in their setup for how they did things. And then I've got like the little Daytimer leather cover where I can put multiple just little notepads in it. Daytimers are, I'm sorry if you use them, but they're really overpriced. I mean, some of the mid-sized Daytimers, just the leather cover is like $100. And none of the stuff that goes in them is waterproof, so it's kind of a hassle.